Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchek and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Pretty good, Mike. How are you doing today?
Not bad. It's finally starting to warm up here. It was a whole 65 degrees, and it was amazing. I'm just over the moon.
65 degrees, eh? Sounds cold.
Yeah, I do kind of miss the fact that, like, summer is a thing that happens routinely in Texas, but...
You mean all the time? Every day a raging inferno.
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't want to sound too harsh on Texas as a state, but yeah, I don't miss like the month of 100+ degree weather, but I do certainly miss summer being present. But that said, let's get into the upkeep. We've got an interesting deck to talk about today, so let's take care of the have tos so we can get on to the I want tos. Starting us off here, Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is one of the people bringing this show to you on a weekly basis. They have all sorts of neat magic stuff. They've got dice bags, playmats, tokens, art prints, all sorts of stuff with original pieces of magic art as well as assorted art from throughout history. They do really, really great work. We stand by their product 100%, and it all looks real nice. So if you want to, maybe class up your play space a little bit, nice fancy new playmat, some sweet little tokens. They've got an entire set of pauper-centric tokens. All sorts of neat stuff can be yours, and if you decide to purchase something from them, we have an affiliate code. So if you use the code Commontary, all caps, spelled as is in the name of this podcast, as you check out, you're going to get 5% off your order. And we're also going to get a little bit of a kickback. So you're helping keep the lights on here, and you're also saving yourself a little bit of money. One last time, that code is Commontary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast. What do you have for us today, Adrian?
Well, hat in hand, the Color Commentary HQ lights have been flickering lately, but to help keep them on, you too can join our Patreon. For just $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including the pre- and post shows, as well as getting access to our Patreon-exclusive Discord channel. Pretty sweet.
Yeah, and there's been some fun times on there as of late, so definitely a quality perk, and we've had a handful of new people joining us recently, so always glad to grow that little community. All right, so Adrian, this deck we're talking about today,
yes,
is an interesting one. And this actually comes from someone who, funnily enough, does support us on Patreon. It's Any New Province, who has his YouTube series, Possibly Pauper Playable, which I'm really glad I managed to pronounce right on the first go. Where he brews up decks, runs them through a league, and that's kind of the thing. And with this deck in particular, he didn't manage to get a 5-0 with it, but someone else did, and we took a look at it, and I don't know, I think this deck's kind of neat. What about you, Adrian?
I think it looks good. It looks fun. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of readers in this one. There's a lot of cards in here that I kind of have to look up myself. Do you want to take us through some of these creatures here?
Yeah, let's do it. First up, we got an old favorite, Acacian Javelineers. Acacian Javelineers. A Javelineer of some sort. W gets you a 1/1, which human soldier enters the battlefield with a javelin counter on it. Old school. Tap, remove a javelin counter from Acacian Javelineers. Acacian Javelineers deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So basically, for 1 mana and 1 charge counter, you have a one-time use, not Young Pyromancer, Prodigal Pyromancer. Also, in the 1-drop slot, we got a couple, so bear with me. We have Loyal Sentry. This is a recent downshift in M25. W gets you a 1/1. Whenever Loyal Sentry blocks a creature, destroy that creature in Loyal Sentry. I would like to note, this is a triggered ability. It goes on the stack. That is important for the rest of the deck.
Yeah, we'll be getting into it, but that chunk of text doesn't function quite as intended here.
Right. It's really... I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Death Touch was already an ability, but this is sort of like double death touch, like the creature kills itself too.
The closest analog is there's a piece of equipment in I think Mirrodin called Dead Eye Sledge or something. It's a piece of equipment that has the same text on it where whenever equipped creature becomes blocked, it and the creature it's blocking both get destroyed.
Yeah, but it's not actually death touch, which is relevant.
Yeah.
And then rounding out the 1-drop slot, we have 4 copies of Thraben Inspector. Inspector Thraben. W gets you a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate. Get a clue token, which you can cycle. So already liking the W 1-drop slots. Pretty good against aggro. Seems like it's not super awful against Delver. You have Vacation Javelineers. That's gonna maybe snag you one. So looking good so far.
I'm liking what I'm seeing. Like, Thraben Inspector is an absolute house, and ever since its release, it's all like heavy play in Standard. It continues to see really heavy play in Pauper, and like I've seen people compare it as quote the Pauper the white Muldrifter, and I gotta say the longer I see this thing played, the less I find that statement patently ridiculous.
Well, so here's the thing about Muldrifter. I feel like people are just playing it less. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, like Tron's still playing it because they get to cast it functionally for like 3-ish or 2-ish mana, but outside of Tron, it's not seeing a whole bunch of play. Like I guess like Alchemy's still playing it, but it's not kind of the omnipresent force that it used to be.
Well, and I know that we do this kind of a lot, but back in the Drake days, you would go Drake Muldrifter, and if you didn't have the combo, that was almost always enough to just win the game.
Yeah, it was real good when it came with like free 2/3s attached to it.
Yeah. So continuing on, and here's where things start to get interesting. We have four copies of Deputy of Acquittals. This is a Dragon's Maze card, so if you haven't heard of it, I'm honestly not surprised. It's a white and a blue for a bear, 2/2 with flash. When Deputy of Acquittals enters the battlefield, and you return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. So wait, before we go on, we should review this card in combination with the other 3 creatures we've already talked about.
Yeah, so right away, like, you can rebuy your Occasion Javelineers, get another counter, against decks with lots of X1s. For example, I'm just going to toss it out there, Elves. That can be potentially big game. With Loyal Sentry, you can actually flash in Deputy of Acquittals after the trigger goes on the stack and just bounce it back to your hand so it won't die. And with Thraben Inspector, it's just getting you another clue, getting you more card draw, just building that value.
Yeah, seems pretty good with the cards we have already. Also saves your creature from some spot removal. Might not be so relevant with these first three couple of creatures, but definitely more relevant later on.
Now, one of the interesting things I do want to point out about this, it does target a creature, which is weird for these types of effects. I don't know if that's ever like dreadfully relevant. Like technically your opponent can kind of like stifle this ETB trigger with Vines of the Vastwood if it's particularly relevant in that moment. But I don't know. It's kind of a weird like note on this particular take on the ETB bounce one of your own things creature. So I think I just kind of wanted to bring that up just because it is there.
Yeah, that is actually pretty interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Our next creature, Core Skyfisher, just says when it enters the battlefield, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. No targeting. Another favorite, a staple in the Boros decks. 1 and a white, 2/3. Return permanent you control to its owner's hand. It is flying. So typically this is combined with stuff like Prophetic Prism or Monarch cards in order to help generate long-term, card advantage, for lack of a better term. It still puts in work here because you can return Occasion Javelineers or Thraben Inspector, but the targets seem a little bit less good so far. Yeah.
Also, one of the other things, not to backtrack too much, but I did notice Deputy of Acquittals is a May. I don't think I had actually noticed that. It's not a requirement. Like, you can play this just as a flash bear.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are lines where that's actually relevant, but like I did just want to get that out there. For Core Skyfisher, a lot of these effects, like outside of Loyal Sentry, you can rebuy them at sorcery speed just fine.
And with Core Skyfisher, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a downside, or at the very least, maybe it was originally intended to use with landfall because it's from Zendikar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't really. It's never really been a downside. It's kind of like how, you know, sometimes people joke that, you know, creatures that have activated abilities that require you to sacrifice something else actually have two upsides. But yeah, it's kind of within Pauper, at least it's evolved into this card that just plays this support role where you jam your deck full of stuff that wants to ETB multiple times, and you get a discounted 2/3 flyer.
Right.
So what are some of the other things we're gonna be rebuying and recasting here?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Up next, we got Lone Missionary, a 1/2 for 2, 1 and a white. When Lone Missionary enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. So pretty good at blunting some of the assaults in Pauper. Very good against Burn, for example, which remains a popular online deck. And also gaining. So here's my thing. Most of the time, the conventional Magic wisdom is that life gain isn't really that great. And by and large, it's not. But in Pauper, it always feels... it's relevant enough that people run Feed the Clan. You know what I mean? Like, life gain does matter to a certain extent in this format.
Yeah, and with Lone Missionary, it's stapled on it's stapled on a reasonably costed body. Like, 2 mana for a 2/1 is not amazing, but the fact that it has that ETB trigger and 4 life is a pretty sizable chunk. This against Burn represents either a Fire Blast or 2 of its bolts. And, you know, 4 life also... the other deck that springs to mind, like Affinity, that's 2 more artifacts for Atog to have to eat. It's 1, maybe 1.5 to 2 pump spells out of Stompy. Like, 4 life is a significant chunk. It's not quite as good as like the 6 you're getting from stuff like Pulse of Marasa, but this does really put your opponent's clock usually a turn or at least a card slower. So I think here, with the fact that you're probably going to be recasting this multiple times over the course of a game, that 4 life is going to add up really quickly.
Yeah.
What other life gain do we have here?
We got 2 copies of Aven Riftwatcher. This is a one that we don't really see a lot. It's a bird rebel soldier, 3 creature types, and it's played in some decks. You can play it in soldiers, you can play it in rebels. Also gets played in the reality acid deck sometimes. But 2 and a white gets you a 2/3 flying. When Aven Riftwatcher enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life, and it has an ability called Vanishing. Vanishing is kind of like this other ability called Fading, where you have a certain number of counters on a creature, and you take them off each upkeep, and then at the end, you have to sacrifice it. I think Fading is actually a little bit better, because I think it's if you would go to remove a counter and you can't, then you sacrifice it. Whereas with Vanishing, as soon as the last counter is removed, it's gone.
So actually, I think technically, do we have any way of like removing counters off stuff in this format? Like, I know we don't have Hex Parasite. I know we don't have...
I think you can play... what's that card that lets you remove a counter from a suspend card? Clockwinding?
Oh, clock spinning.
Yeah. Is that a common?
But I think that's only exile stuff.
Hold on, I'm looking. It is a common. No. Choose a counter on target permanent or suspended card. Remove that counter from that permanent or card, or put another of those counters on it. So you could do it. I mean,
yeah. Like, if you can get this thing to 0 counters without it going through that trigger at the beginning of your upkeep, I believe. Let me just reread it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter from it. When the last one is removed, sacrifice it. I believe. Right. Oh no! Does that just kill it immediately?
Yeah, it would. Fading is worded
where if you couldn't,
if you can't, then you sacrifice it. Correct. So fading is the better keyword.
All right. We're deep down a tangent here.
Yeah, I know, but we love it.
Yeah. So this thing provides a clock in the air. It also provides a little bit of life gain, and it notably is a leaves the battlefield trigger, not a dies trigger. So if this thing gets flickered, if it gets bounced to hand, you're still gaining that 2 life. Just kind of providing, again, more of a buffer to keep you from dying against the aggressive decks.
And up next, we got another recent downshift from M25. 2 in a blue gets you Court Hussar, which is a 1/3 with Vigilance. When Court Hussar enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put one of them into your hand and the rest at the bottom of your library in any order.
Yep, this thing anticipates. It's also a 1/3 with Vigilance. So, and we
downside.
Yeah, we missed the important part. If you didn't spend white to cast it, you sacrifice it when it ETBs.
So pretty important to include white in its casting cost. When we go over the lands, I think that'll be very self-evident. This is mostly a white deck. This is one of 3 blue cards, and one of them is actually Deputy of Acquittals. So not a lot of blue in the deck. Really just a splash.
Yeah, and I will note, again, much like a Evoke, that is a triggered ability on its ETB. If you don't spend the white to cast it, it puts that ability on the stack. You can respond to that with Deputy.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. That makes sense.
I believe, yeah. Court Hussar, it at least has the trigger for its ETB go on the stack. I don't believe that it just literally like vanishes out of play.
Right. So keeping up. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Take us through the last couple here.
All right, so we've got 2 copies of Stonehorn Dignitary, 3 in a white for a 1/4, a Rhino Soldier. When Stonehorn Dignitary enters the battlefield, target opponent skips his or her next combat phase. So very slow, but you can use it to stabilize in the late game. If you're able to chain this together for 3, 4, 5 turns, you essentially have a repeatable fog. And then we have 3 copies of Custody Squire, which is a card that looks really good, and everyone thought it was going to just revolutionize the format when it finally got put on Moto, but we really haven't seen it too much. It's a 5 mana, 4 and a white for a 3/3 with flying, and it has an ability called Will to Counsel. When Custody Squire enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for an artifact, creature, or enchantment card in your graveyard, and then you return each card with the most votes or tied for the most votes to your hand. So it's like a souped-up Gravedigger, but it's just never really caught on as like a meta card.
Yeah, so this basically is a combo Gravedigger. So what? Gravedigger, Oromancer, and Sanctum Gargoyle?
Yeah.
And it also happens to be a 3/3 in the air. And notably, if you're playing as this card on Mitgo for some reason, remember to select the same card your opponent does. If you select something else, they'll get both of them.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I've loved this card ever since Conspiracy was out, and it was something that I drafted fairly frequently. Like, this thing puts in work just in terms of it's a reasonable body. It has evasion. It gets you back another reasonable body. Like, if you have 2 of these, you can kind of just if one of them dies, get it back with the other one, then just hold it in hand, wait for the first one to die, and just loop through that a bunch. You just kind of have infinitely regrowing 3/3s. I don't know. I really, really like this card.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah. All right. Let me take us through some of these spells here now. So we've got 2 copies of Celestial Flare. White instant. Target player sacrifices an attacking or blocking creature, and this is probably the cheapest piece of white removal in the format that happens at instant speed, but does require your opponent to decide to get into combat. How are you feeling about Celestial Flare?
I think Celestial Flare is one of those cards that people kind of play out in white decks. Base white decks have to sort of play out of necessity. Like, your removal options in white are shockingly not that great in Pauper. I know, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, white's a staple removal in other formats, but in Pauper, really the best one is, and I know I'm skipping a little ahead here, is Journey to Nowhere, 1 and a white to exile a creature. But that's an enchantment. So I think that the white speed instant removal spells are kind of at a premium. So it doesn't surprise me to see it in the list. It's probably very good against certain matchups. Probably awful against decks like Elves, of course. But what else would you be playing in the slot? Like Sunlance, or maybe more copies of Vacation Javelineers? I'm sure there's a flex slot here for another piece of white removal, but I like the job Celestial Flare gets done.
I mean, this also does a pretty decent job against, Boggles doesn't really care for this being played against them. Tron, when it's playing Ulamog's Crusher, sometimes that'll be the only creature they have on the battlefield. It just, it puts in enough work where I don't feel like it's the worst main deck. Now, as you mentioned, Journey to Nowhere, great piece of removal. It's a 1 and a white for an enchantment. When it ETBs, exile a creature. When it leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control.
And if you'd like, you can even bounce this with Core Skyfisher. Use it early, then bounce it later with Core Skyfisher when a better target presents itself.
Yeah. It also, like there are plays sometimes where, your opponent potentially like sacks one thing, the thing you were targeting, you put something else underneath it. If they're playing something like, I don't know, Tortured Existence, something where they can get value out of the thing not being exiled. So there are reasons to rebuy this thing. Also, we've got 1 copy of Momentary Blink, which is 1 and a white for an instant. Exile target creature you control, return to the battlefield under its owner's control. And then it has flashback for 3 and a blue. So just kind of yet another way to abuse these ETB triggers. How are you liking this as the instant speed flicker for this deck?
The deck is noticeably not playing the Archaeomancer or Mnemonic Wall. It probably doesn't really want to. Like, it doesn't really seem that synergistic with the rest of the deck. So I do kind of like this. It's more in on the creatures and less in on this repeatable loop with the creature spell combo, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I admit, like, when we first looked at this, I was kind of shocked not to see at least one ghostly flicker and some amount of like walls or Archaeomancers. I'm guessing that most of that is just so that it gets to remain a base white deck.
Yeah, and the other thing, it definitely helps the mana. And the other thing is, this is really more of like a creature beatdown deck. There are 30 creatures in this deck, and if you're playing Mnemonic Wall, I think you're kind of priced into playing more spells.
Yeah, like I guess that's true. Like, there's not really a lot of like value wall targets here. Like, you're not like with Tron. Like, most of your deck is instants and sorceries. You're getting back something with it and stifling one of their attackers. So I guess I can see why that wouldn't appeal as much to this particular list.
Right.
And finally here, and we've kind of skirted around this as we've talked about this, the, I guess, linchpin of the deck, the really neat thing that it's doing. The
marquee.
Yeah, the marquee. There you go. There's a great term for that. Escape routes. Now, escape routes is a little known common from way back in planeshift. It's 2 and a blue for an enchantment, and then it has the ability 2 and a blue, return target white or black creature you control to its owner's hand. Okay, so if anyone was paying attention, you can rebuy everything in this deck except for Court Hussar. Every one of those creatures. Everything that we just went through. All right, so this tax 2 and a blue onto the cost of any of these creatures to kind of rebuy them. What are you liking best about this?
I think it's just some pretty sweet tech. Like, it's a fun card, and you're a value like creature deck, right? So really the most obvious combo to me, well, I guess there's a couple. Lone Missionary, Aven Riftwatcher, and especially Stonehorn Dignitary seem to benefit the most from this. Those are the creatures with repeatable enter the battlefield effects, which is a lot of the creatures, but I think those are the most high power. And then Custody Squire can get this back for you if someone blows it up.
Yeah, like, you do have the option of, in response, if you have a Custody Squire out, you can just, if they go to blow this thing up, you just bounce the Squire, get the thing back.
It's also going to make your creatures hard to kill.
Oh, yeah. Also notably, Loyal Sentry. Let's talk about this combo.
Oh, yeah.
So this basically means that if your opponent swings in with ground creatures and you have a Loyal Sentry out, you can bounce it back to your hand when that trigger goes on the stack, and your opponent then has the option of using instant speed removal to kill the thing. Or, like if they want to permanently get rid of this thing, they're going to 2-for-1 themselves somehow. And
the fools,
man, this is just like, I can imagine certain matchups where that just kind of locks up the game. And notably, that happens on blocks. So Loyal Sentry's ability will go on the stack before you move to damage. So this blocks creatures with trample. It blocks anything without flying, pretty much. And that thing is going to die. I think this is a cute combo, but like I could see this being incredibly frustrating to play against from some decks.
If you play it in the right match, it's probably very, very crushing. I like that there's only one copy of Escape Routes. You know, you're not really like all in on it, so you don't really dilute your deck, but when you get it going, it's gonna be sweet.
So we talked about this briefly before the show. This deck is kind of similar to Tortured Existence, except it's working on a different axis. Like where Tortured Existence is looking to mill itself and then use the graveyard kind of as a second hand, this is using an enchantment that is more expensive, costs more to activate, but lets you reuse stuff that's in play currently. So I guess looking at this list, what is there that you really want included in this? Because there's the distinct downside of Escape Routes puts you firmly in blue. Your creatures cannot be mostly blue, otherwise Escape Routes is garbage. Like, is there anything else that you think this deck could benefit from that it's not already playing?
Well, I think for that we could go to the sideboard.
Yeah, totally.
There are cards in. And the reason I want to do that is specifically because there are 2 copies of Palace Sentinels, everyone's favorite Monarch card, 3 and a white for a 2/4 that makes you the Monarch, and Core Sanctifiers, 2 and a white for a 2/3 with Kicker White. When Core Sanctifiers enters the battlefield, it was kicked, you destroy target artifact or enchantment. So the value of those cards definitely goes up. And of course, they're a little bit more niche. You can make an argument for playing the main deck, perhaps. But in the side, they're very powerful sideboard cards that combo with your main game plan, with your Deputy of Acquittals and your Core Skyfisher, and can also be used to, Core Sanctifiers and Escape Routes. You could really shut down like a someone's game. I don't know about Affinity, that seems awfully slow, but maybe against Boros Monarch, which is I'm sure what Palace Sentinels is in there for as well.
Yeah, like that could definitely put in work. I'm trying to think of other stuff that you could kind of abuse with Escape Routes, because obviously, there is the other entire factor of there's no black in this deck. And honestly, I think pushing into black might stretch your mana base a little thin. Like, we're already on kind of tenuous ground here as it stands. But I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking through what effects, what other ETB effects.
What do you get in black?
Gray Merchant.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess in that vein, why don't? Oh yeah, never mind. White or black? Huh? Is there a white card that drains like that? I was gonna say Parasitic Strix, but that doesn't work with Escape Routes.
No. Parasitic Strix. Oh wait, is that the mono blue?
It's blue. Yeah, you're thinking Baleful Strix, which is definitely
that's right. That's right.
Or
yeah.
rare.
I'm just looking through here. How do you feel about Countless Gears Renegade? It's 1 and white for 2/2. Revolt, when it enters the battlefield, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, create a 1/1 servo. So if you bounce this thing to your hand, you always get that servo.
I don't know. Getting a servo doesn't seem that strong.
All right. Other things we've got. Dawn Feather Eagle, 4 and a white for a 3/3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn.
I don't hate it, but it's just so slow.
Sure, but I mean, this is a deck that's already playing 3 copies of Custody Squire. Like, it's planning to go to the late game. I don't know. Sure. I don't think that's as miserable as you might think. And it's only creatures, man. There's a bunch of like neat ETB enchantments in white, but I'm just looking here. Heliod's Pilgrim only gets auras, so that's kind of out of the question. I guess I'm trying to think through, like, if there's anything else that you could possibly get and like get significant amount of value out of. And I think that we may not actually have that much room to kind of improve upon from here. Just because ETB effects in white are not great by and large.
Yeah, they're all the bounce ones.
Yeah. They're bounce creatures, or they're things that gain life less effectively than Lone Missionary does. There's Sandstep Outcast, which generates 1/1s with flying when it ETBs.
What about Sandcrafter Mage?
What is that one?
I don't even remember. It's not good.
Sandcrafter Mage bolsters 1 when it ETBs, which is kind of awkward because eventually it'll become the thing with the lowest toughness. I guess like you could play a build of this with Soul Sisters in it. Like,
oh yeah, that might be nice. So you can gain some extra life.
Yeah, it's not exactly like breaking anything though. Sunspire Gatekeepers, the 2/4 for 4 that when it ETBs, if you control 2 or more gates, you get a 2/2 Knight with Vigilance.
Yeah, but then you need to play Guild Gates. I don't know. I'm not loving it.
No, I guess that's fair.
Let's go over the rest of the sideboard too, just so we can, and then we'll cover the lands. We got another copy of Loyal Sentry, which fits with our game plan. A copy of Last Breath, or exile target creature with power 2 or less. Its controller gains 4 life, 1 in a white instant. Not bad. Helps against small decks. Good against Stompy. Leave no trace. Destroy target enchantment and each other enchantment that shares a color with it. So this is one of the many things you can bring in against Boggles. This might be one of the best ones that's just straight up white. I like Ray Revelation personally, but it has a flashback cost of green.
Yeah. Now that you mention that, like, is there an argument to be presented here for maybe running some count of Prophetic Prism here, just for splashes?
I was thinking about that too. I actually don't think this deck wants to play Prophetic Prism, and the reason is the only card that really combos with it is Core Skyfisher.
That's true. Deputy doesn't bounce permanents,
and neither does escape routes. So I don't really like it in this deck. Actually, after I thought about it,
no. That's fair.
We have 2 copies of Standard Bearer, 1 in a white, everyone's favorite flag bearer. 1 copy of Dust to Dust. 1 and 2 white to exile 2 target artifacts. Pretty good against Affinity. You can exile their lands. We also have 3 copies of Fairy Macabre, which is a black creature. So Goldfish counted this as a Esper deck, but really the card is meaningless other than that you can discard to exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards, which is really sweet.
Yeah, it is one of the, when this card is really good in a matchup, it is backbreaking. It does kind of bum me out. This is just being played with no way to actually cast it. Like, I almost might prefer this to be 2 or 3 copies of Relic of Progenitus.
It's basically Leyline of the Void and Pauper, dude.
Wow, that was a catastrophically bad comparison. Yeah, but okay.
So bear with me also on Relic.
Okay.
I guess it's not too bad, but it isn't great with Custody Squire, but I don't know if that's so bad that you just don't want to play it. Certainly if you're a little budget, you might also not want to run Standard Bearers. They're, more than $1. So
dude, they're up to like $3 now in paper, and
yeah,
that is frankly baffling.
So if you're on a budget, I could
Okay.
Wait, why am I talking about Standard Bearer? We're talking about Fairy Macabre. I'm so sorry. I looked at Standard Bearer and I thought that I just said the name of that card. We were talking about Fairy Macabre.
Yeah, like
I'm sorry, y'all. I did not mean to switch like that.
No. We're all good. I just, there's not a lot of other grave hate that's like top tier besides like Relic. Like, I guess you could play Nihil Spellbomb knowing you'll never draw the card off of it, but like that doesn't feel great.
No, that doesn't feel great. Oh, I was thinking of Custody Squire, because Custody Squire returns stuff from your graveyard, but it's $9 online. So if that is a cost break for you, you maybe could not run them and then run. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. You're right. I like this card a lot. I think it's the best one.
All right, and then the only thing left in the board is the 2 copies Holy Light, which is 2 and a white for an instant. All non-white creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn.
Your answer to elves.
It's got that really, really awful Drew Tucker art.
Or that really, really awesome Drew Tucker art. Am I right?
It's some sad person's butt. Like It's not good.
It is a bet.
Yeah. All right. So in terms of lands, like we've got 3 Azorius Chancery, the blue-white bounce land. We've got 2 islands, 2 Kabira Crossroads, a white tapped land, ETB tapped land that gains you 2 life when it enters the battlefield. We've got 10 plains, 1 Radiant Fountain, a secluded Radiant Fountain's card land taps for colorless. You gain 2 when it enters the battlefield. 1 copy Secluded Step, a white tap land that cycles for a white, and then we've got 4 Tranquil Coves, which is the blue-white game land. Does this deck really need to run Kabira Crossroads and Radiant Fountain?
I am pondering this. Kabira Crossroads enters tapped. So if there's ever a reason you would want colorless but untapped mana, I guess, but it really feels like 6 of one, half dozen of another to me, because there are so many just like W1 drops in the deck. So
yeah, it just
having an untapped white source seems pretty important on turn 1.
Yeah, it feels to me like cutting Kabira Crossroads and cutting Radiant Fountain might streamline this deck, especially because you got 8 1-drops. Like, it just feels like it runs counterintuitively to what the deck wants to be doing early game.
Would you up your Secluded Step counts because you can still bounce those with Chancery later, or you can actually bounce those with Core Skyfisher later for an extra card? What do you think of playing more Secluded Steps over maybe Kabira Crossroads?
Honestly, if I were running this, I'd go up to 13 planes and just cut the life gain lands.
All right,
that would be my take. Like, I actually maybe go up to 12 planes, 3 islands, but like, I don't think you need the life gain. I guess you're not that aggressive. Like, I could see the argument for including some additional number of Secluded Steps. I don't think you go up to the full play set, but having that card draw is nice, right?
Right. And there's also a lower, like, I'm thinking of the other decks where Radiant Fountain gets played, and I feel like there's just a lower opportunity cost in those decks. A lot of them, like Alchemy doesn't have a ton of 1-drops that matter on turn 1. And then in Boros, it's negated by the fact that you're running like Prophetic Prism and such. So it makes sense in those decks, but I could see cutting one here, or at least the Kabira Crossroads.
Yeah, it seems like overkill. Like, you've got like just on the first cast between the Lone Missionaries and Aven Rift Watchers, you've got 20 points of life gain. Plus, on top of that, you have Stonehorn Dignitary. Custody Squire can rebuy all of those if they die. You've got Escape Routes. You've got a Momentary Blink. You've got 4 Skyfisher effects. Like, I don't know. Like, do you?
What if you face 5? What if you face 5 burn decks?
Even if you face 5 burn decks, I feel like if you mulligan into a life gain card, that might be enough. I just don't see the case to be made here for having, I think particularly the Kabira Crossroads, but also the fact that like Radiant Fountain is a colorless land. And while this is not the most color heavy deck I've ever seen,
it's not the cost. The cost is not 0.
Yeah, it's a non-zero cost, and I really think that you just prefer to have either more basics or cards that draw you cards, because outside of the 4 copies of Court Hussar, you're not really digging on any. I guess Thraben Inspector has card draw attached to it, but like, your card draw is not super dense here, and you're in blue, so I feel like I just want lands that do more that other cards in your deck aren't already doing. That would be my takeaway on this. Is I just think that the life gain is redundant, and like, while we don't have the best ETB lands, I feel like we've got better than this.
Sure.
All right, so now that we've talked about this deck for a while, are there any tweaks you'd make to this at all? Like, we kind of looked through some of the ETB effect creatures.
Well, I stand by what I sort of said earlier, where maybe I would cut one or two of the life gain lands and maybe play an extra secluded step, just because I think that's pretty interesting. Are we in at all for playing a card like Sin's Enlistment? It doesn't really synergize with the rest of the deck, I think, is the big problem.
Yeah, I think Sens, while it gives you a level of inevitability in some matchups, just doesn't synergize enough with the deck as it stands. I guess the other thing that might be worth mentioning, and it's like an old piece of tech from the Reality Acid decks. Do you like Dreamstalker at all here?
No, we just sort of discussed it earlier. Well, actually, hold on. What do you think about maybe taking out like 2 Court Hussars and playing 2 Dreamstalkers instead?
So going down on card draw and up on ways to bounce your stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know, because
I don't love it.
If I was going to be cutting anything for any number of Dreamstalkers, I'd be most tempted by Deputy of Acquittals. Like, yes, you're losing a bit of the value with Loyal Sentry, but I kind of like the fact that I don't know, like the 1/5 body is just really, really difficult for some decks to deal with. Red removal does not line up well against it at all. I don't know. I'm just trying to think through, like, because this deck does bear a certain resemblance to the old the Reality Acid decks of yore. Is there any argument
Sorry, go ahead.
Is there any argument to be made for White Mane Lion over Deputy of Acquittals? So White Mane Lion, in case you're not familiar with it, for those at home, 1 and a white for a cat 2/2 with flash. As it enters the battlefield, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. So it loses the fact that it's a May, but it's easier on the mana.
I actually kind of like that more. If there was a way for us to get also, I don't know. Yeah, I like that.
And the other thing, I guess, is the only white evoke creature at common Wispmare?
I think so.
The ETB erase.
Yeah, I think so.
That's kind of a bummer. Because I was gonna say, like, having something else that you can sort of exploit.
Instant speed. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, just thinking out loud here as well. Is there an argument for potentially going into 3 colors or subbing black for white here?
You could not replace the white in this deck with black cards.
Well, I'm saying, like, reconstruct this as a fundamentally different deck, like leaning into, like, because black has some very, very,
I feel like if that's the case, then you're going to rely a lot more on escape routes in that case, because I don't think black has a lot of ways of returning creatures to its hand.
Sure, like you're losing out on the bounce stuff, but here's what I'm thinking.
You're really saying a black deck with escape routes, right?
Yeah, I'm saying a black deck that's not fully dissimilar from mono black control, where it leans heavily on value ETB creatures, but instead of just kind of grinding, like having the ability to rebuy these things, like looping Gray Merchant with escape routes is 8 mana, but like those are usually haymaker punches that come out of that card. I don't know. I guess at that point though, like, why aren't you just doing Tordex and, you know, playing blue cards with it? Yeah. Okay. I've managed to somehow talk myself out of this over the course of, you know, a minute or so.
You know what? I enjoyed every second of it.
All right. I appreciate that you're at least along for the ride.
Look, we're friends.
Now, is there anything to be said for, like, some of the common token producers? I'm thinking, like, I guess
not a lot of,
like, Attended Night.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Maybe like as a one of. Maybe you
Yeah.
could cut one Court Hussar, because I don't think you should overload on those effects, because I don't think they're actually very good like by themselves. But if you were to build up a situation where you had escape routes and one of those, that could be pretty strong.
Okay. I see what you're getting at there. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because I always think of white as having more ETB effects than it actually does, I think. Like I've been looking back and forth at this, and like I'm just not seeing anything that's like blowing me away. Like I guess there's Core Hookmaster, the 3-mana 2/2 that when it ETBs you tap a creature and it doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. But again, not really blowing anything out of the water there with that one. Interesting. What does the blue Spellbomb do again? The original Mirrodin one. It bounces something, right?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, this is kind of niche, but like Leonin Squire exists. The 1 and white 2/2 when it ETBs return a artifact with converted mana cost 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Or am I just going down like the nichest of corners?
I feel like we've started going down the niches to corners. We did that a while ago, to be fair. Yeah.
I mean we're already talking about a deck that's definitely an outsider. But I don't know. I really like the idea of this, but
so it reminds me of a bunch of decks that have never really been like, some of them have been really good, but like it even goes back, like it even reminds me of some of the old Jeskai Katie decks. Just, having all this bounce and like trying to generate value off of the bounce. And it also seems to be kind of like reality acid. So, but it definitely, I feel like the reason to play this deck is if you like weird, wacky Pauper Brews, but really if you want to play with escape routes, this deck seems like the place to be. Like specifically, I want to play with escape routes.
Yeah, and I cannot for the life of me remember enough about Invasion Block Draft to remember if this card was like something that was absolutely stupid in that draft format, or if it was something that like was absolutely unplayable garbage. But I vaguely remember seeing this played in that draft format. Like I think it's a powerful effect. I think that this is in the same realm, and I know people are gonna love to just hop in the comments on this one, but it kind of reminds me of Tordex in the fact that it is a engine card, which we see kind of rarely in Pauper. Like cards like this are interesting and unique within our format, and I think that actually like is what drew both of us to this deck. Just the fact that like while it does look somewhat like the old Reality Acid decks, it looks somewhat like the old Jeskai Kitty decks. Like this is very much its own like creature. Like it's just different. So I guess I would recommend like checking this deck out. Like it's not super expensive. It's $36 online, 32 in paper. I don't know. Do you really think someone could go wrong with this?
I think that your mileage will vary. I don't mean this as an insult. Definitely you can take it into a league, but this feels like a deck I might want to play at F&M or like a GP.
Yeah, this
somewhere in paper where the interface isn't so strict, and the meta is just a little bit more loosey goosey. Like I think that's where this deck would really shine.
Yeah, I think if I was to bring this to a paper event, I might. I don't know. It's one of those things because you know what? I'm gonna go back to one of my earlier statements. I think I would actually keep the life gain lands in if I was bringing this to a paper event, because people who don't play Pauper will play Pauper at paper events if they have burn built in another format.
Yes, absolutely. I even more so than playing in leagues, I played against more red decks than anything else the entire time I was playing paper Pauper over in Japan. Like people just like to play red. It's cheap, it's easy, and they know what it does.
Yeah, and like the game plan for that deck is pretty much the same across the formats. The exact tools you're using to execute that game plan change from format to format, but like the overall, like if you can play burn in one format, you can probably play it in another. It's the
We should redo a red episode soon. I like those.
Yeah, it's one of those decks where it's so easy to port from one to another, where whenever I play at paper events, I lean into anti-burn tech a little bit harder than I would if I was playing online. So
definitely.
I don't know. I definitely jam this at an F&M, and I think I'm looking at the list again. I think outside of the escape routes, I have all of this. So I may, the next time I order cards online, pick up a playset of escape routes just to play around with, because I do like the concept of this quite a bit.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, I definitely think this is neat, and I definitely am glad for, any new province coming out with this list. And then we didn't actually mention the name, but Fletchman 5-0ing with it and bringing it to the greater Pauper community's attention. So I don't know, try it out. Like if this sort of like flicker and bounce plan with like blue cards seems like a fun time to you, I'd say pick it up. It's pretty cheap, and with Pauper prices rising day by day, $30 ain't bad for a deck these days.
For sure.
All right, Adrian, you got anything else on this deck, or you want to take us out of the show for the day?
I am going to take us out of the show, Mike. That time. Thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our patrons, especially Geek Luke G. You are this week's shout out. Please consider supporting us if you like the show. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS, Pat's Games, Mike's LGS, JP Comics, I almost called it Pat's Comics, and of course, L for the use of our theme song, Quantitative. You can find that and other great tracks over at his SoundCloud, which is soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.